Picture this. It's 322 BCE. The Indian subcontinent is a patchwork of warring kingdoms. A land of great wealth and wisdom, but deeply divided. In the heart of this fractured landscape sits the powerful kingdom of Magadha, ruled by the Nanda dynasty. But their reign is far from stable. The king, Dhanananda, is fabulously wealthy but deeply unpopular, known for his arrogance and oppressive taxes. The people are restless, resentful of a ruler who hoards riches while they struggle. And to make matters worse, a storm from the west has just shaken the very foundations of the land. Alexander the Great and his Macedonian armies have swept through the northwestern regions, leaving a power vacuum and a sense of vulnerability in their wake. The air is thick with uncertainty and the scent of change. It's a time ripe for a revolution, a moment waiting for a hero to rise from the chaos. And from this very chaos, our story's hero emerges. A young man, not of royal blood, but possessing a fierce ambition and an unyielding will. His name is Chandragupta Maurya. We don't know much about his early life. History paints a blurry picture. Some say he was an orphan, raised by peacock tamers. Others claim he had a distant connection to the Nanda family. But what we do know is that he was a natural leader, charismatic and bold, with a vision that stretched far beyond the fragmented kingdoms of his time. He looked at the weak and corrupt Nanda king. He saw the chaos left by foreign invaders, and he didn't just see turmoil. He saw an opportunity to unite the scattered states of India under a single banner, to forge a new destiny for the subcontinent. He dreamt of an empire, a unified India, strong and prosperous. But a dream, no matter how grand, is just a dream without a plan. And a leader, no matter how charismatic, is nothing without a guide. This is where our story takes a fateful turn. In his quest for power and knowledge, Chandragupta travels to the renowned center of learning, Taxila. And there, he encounters a man who would change his life, and the course of Indian history, forever. This was Chanakya. A brilliant scholar, a master of economics and political science, and a cunning strategist. Chanakya was a Brahmin teacher, sharp-witted and even sharper-tongued. Legend has it that he had been publicly insulted by King Dhanananda, and in that moment of humiliation he swore an oath of vengeance. He vowed he would not rest until the entire Nanda dynasty was uprooted and destroyed. When Chanakya met the young, ambitious Chandragupta, he saw the perfect instrument for his revenge, but also something more. He saw a king. A true leader who could realize the vision of a united India that Chanakya himself had written about in his famous treatise, the Arthashastra. The two men, one a young warrior with a fiery dream, the other a wise strategist with a cold, calculated plan, forged a powerful alliance. Their goals aligned perfectly: topple the corrupt Nanda king and build an empire from the ashes. The student and the teacher, the king and the kingmaker, were ready to begin their conquest. With Chanakya as his guide, Chandragupta set his audacious plan into motion. But overthrowing the most powerful empire in India was no small feat. The Nanda army was massive, a colossal force of infantry, cavalry, and fearsome war elephants. A direct assault would be suicide. So Chanakya devised a brilliant, unconventional strategy. Instead of a frontal attack, they would wage a war of 1,000 cuts. The first step was to build an army. They didn't have the resources of a king, so they looked to the people. They recruited from disgruntled soldiers who had deserted the Nandas, from fierce tribesmen in the mountains, from mercenaries, and from ordinary citizens who yearned for a change in leadership. Chandragupta, with his natural charisma, inspired loyalty and courage in his growing band of followers. They started their campaign not at the heart of the empire, but at its edges. Chanakya's strategy was to first conquer the peripheral territories, the regions in the northwest that had been destabilized by Alexander's invasion. This served a dual purpose. It allowed them to build a base of operations, secure resources, and grow their army, all while avoiding a direct confrontation with the main Nanda force. They employed guerrilla tactics, launching swift, surprising attacks on Nanda supply lines, garrisons, and tax collectors. They would strike like lightning and then vanish back into the countryside, where they had the support of the local population. With each small victory, their legend grew. Chandragupta was no longer just a rebel. He was becoming a liberator in the eyes of the people. This slow, methodical strangulation of the Nanda Empire was a masterclass in strategy, weakening the giant from the outside in, preparing for the final, decisive blow. After months, perhaps even years, of systematic conquest and clever warfare, the time was right. Chandragupta's army, now a seasoned and formidable force, had encircled the Nanda heartland. The empire was weakened, its resources stretched thin, and its people were on the verge of open rebellion, their loyalty now firmly with the young challenger. The stage was set for the final act. The target was the magnificent capital city of Pataliputra, a jewel on the banks of the Ganges River and the seat of Nanda power. The siege began. The battle for Pataliputra was fierce and bloody. The Nanda army, cornered but still powerful, fought desperately to defend their king and their city. But Chandragupta's forces were driven by a powerful idea, the promise of a new dawn, while the Nanda soldiers fought merely for a paycheck and an unpopular king. Using Chanakya's cunning tactics, which likely involved everything from military deception to inciting spies and defectors within the city, they breached the walls. The climax arrived in a final, brutal confrontation. Dhanananda, the arrogant king who had once insulted a humble teacher and oppressed his own people, was defeated and killed. The Nanda dynasty, which had ruled for nearly a century, came to a crashing end. As the dust settled over the fallen capital, a new figure ascended the throne. Chandragupta Maurya, the boy of humble origins, the determined rebel, was now the emperor. He had done the impossible. He had conquered the unconquerable. The fall of the Nandas was more than just a change of ruler. It was the birth of a new era. In 322 BCE, Chandragupta Maurya, with Chanakya as his chief advisor, officially founded the Mauryan Empire. This wasn't just another kingdom. It was the first great unified empire in the history of the Indian subcontinent. For the first time, from the Himalayas in the north to the Deccan Plateau in the south, from the Indus Valley in the west to the plains of the Ganges in the east, a vast and diverse land was brought together under a single, centralized administration. The establishment of the Mauryan Empire heralded a period of unprecedented unity, stability, and prosperity. Chanakya's principles of governance, laid out in the Arthashastra, became the blueprint for the new state. A sophisticated bureaucracy was created, a standardized system of weights, measures, and currency was introduced, and a vast network of roads was built, connecting the far-flung corners of the empire and boosting trade and communication. This wasn't just a military conquest. It was the creation of a nation, the realization of a dream shared by a young warrior and his brilliant mentor. The story of Chandragupta Maurya is a timeless testament to how vision, strategy, and an unbreakable will can rise from chaos to forge an empire and change the course of history forever. Picture this. Ancient India, around 326 BCE, a mosaic of warring kingdoms, ripe for conquest. Alexander the Great, the world's most feared conqueror, stands at India's doorstep, having carved an empire from Greece to the Indus River. His Macedonian phalanx seems unstoppable. But then something incredible happens. His battle-hardened troops, weary and intimidated by tales of massive Indian armies and war elephants, refuse to go further. They mutiny. Alexander is forced to turn back, leaving a power vacuum in his wake. It's in this chaotic, uncertain landscape that our story begins. From the shadows of obscurity, a young man will rise. A man destined to forge an empire greater than Alexander's and become India's first true emperor. His name is Chandragupta Maurya. Who was this extraordinary individual? The truth is, his early life is shrouded in mystery, a blend of historical accounts and legendary tales. Some sources say he was born into a noble Kshatriya family, the warrior class. Others claim a much humbler origin, suggesting he was an orphan raised by peacock herders. This very uncertainty adds to his mystique. Was he a prince reclaiming his birthright or a commoner who seized destiny with both hands? Whatever his beginnings, it's clear he possessed a rare combination of ambition, intelligence, and ruthless determination from a very young age. These were the raw materials of an emperor. But raw materials need a master craftsman to be shaped into something great. For Chandragupta, that craftsman was a man named Chanakya. You can't talk about Chandragupta without talking about Chanakya, also known as Kautilya. He was a brilliant, cunning, and fiercely patriotic scholar and political strategist from the University of Takshashila. Legend has it that Chanakya was publicly insulted by Dhanananda, the arrogant and decadent king of the powerful Nanda Empire in Magadha. The Nanda dynasty was fabulously wealthy but deeply unpopular with its people. Humiliated and enraged, Chanakya swore an oath to destroy the Nanda king and replace him with a worthy ruler. His quest for the perfect candidate led him to a young Chandragupta. Seeing the boy's natural leadership and fiery spirit, Chanakya knew he had found his instrument of change. He took Chandragupta under his wing, educating him in military strategy, economics, and the ruthless art of statecraft, all detailed in his famous treatise, the Arthashastra. This wasn't just a teacher-student relationship. It was the forging of a partnership that would change the course of Indian history. With Alexander's retreat, northwestern India was in disarray, governed by Greek satraps or regional governors. This was Chandragupta's first opportunity. Guided by Chanakya's brilliant strategy, he began his campaign. He didn't just march an army in. He was smarter than that. He instigated local rebellions, formed alliances with regional chiefs, and employed guerrilla warfare tactics to systematically pick off the Greek-held territories one by one. His forces were a mix of mercenaries, local militias, and defectors, all united by a common goal: to drive out the foreign invaders. By 323 BCE, the year of Alexander's death, Chandragupta had already established a significant foothold. He was no longer just an ambitious upstart. He was a power to be reckoned with, the liberator of the Northwest. But this was just the beginning. His eyes were set on a much bigger prize, the heart of India, the Nanda Empire. The Nanda Empire was the superpower of its time. Its capital, Pataliputra, was one of the largest and most magnificent cities in the world. Its army was immense, boasting hundreds of thousands of soldiers, cavalry, and thousands of terrifying war elephants. A direct assault would be suicide. Chanakya and Chandragupta knew this. So they devised a clever indirect strategy. Instead of attacking the capital head-on, they started by conquering the outer provinces of the Nanda kingdom, cutting off its supply lines, and gradually encircling the heartland. It was like a game of chess on a continental scale. Each move was calculated, each victory bringing them closer to the king. Popular discontent with the corrupt Nanda rule worked in their favor. Many citizens and local governors, tired of Dana Nanda's tyranny, welcomed Chandragupta's forces as liberators. Finally, after a series of decisive battles, Chandragupta's army marched on Pataliputra. The final confrontation was brutal, but the outcome was clear. The Nanda dynasty fell, and in 322 BCE Chandragupta Maurya ascended the throne, becoming the new master of Magadha. He had avenged Chanakya's insult and, more importantly, laid the foundation for his own empire. Now, with the Nanda lands secured, Chandragupta controlled a vast territory. But a new challenge loomed on the horizon. After Alexander's death, his empire was divided among his generals, the Diadochi. The easternmost part, including the territories bordering India, fell to a man named Seleucus I Nicator. In 305 BCE, Seleucus, eager to reclaim Alexander's Indian conquests, crossed the Indus River with a powerful army. He expected to face scattered Indian kingdoms, just as Alexander had. Instead, he found a unified, formidable empire under a single, brilliant commander. The Mauryan army that met him was nothing like the forces Alexander had faced. It was a well-organized, professional military machine, estimated to be over 500,000 strong. The details of the Seleucid-Mauryan War are scarce, but the result is not. Seleucus was decisively defeated. The peace treaty that followed was a massive victory for Chandragupta. Seleucus ceded vast territories, including modern-day Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan, to the Mauryan Empire. To seal the alliance, he even arranged a marriage between his daughter and Chandragupta. In return, Chandragupta gifted Seleucus 500 war elephants, which would later play a crucial role in his own battles back west. This victory wasn't just about land, it was a statement. The Mauryan Empire was now a dominant world power, respected and feared on the international stage. With the external threats neutralized, Chandragupta focused on consolidating his empire. This is where Chanakya's genius for administration truly shone. Together, they built a highly centralized and efficient bureaucracy. The empire was divided into provinces, each governed by a viceroy, often a prince from the royal family. A vast network of officials and spies ensured that the emperor's will was enforced throughout the realm and that any signs of rebellion were quickly stamped out. They established a common currency, standardized weights and measures, and invested heavily in infrastructure, including a grand royal highway that connected the far-flung parts of the empire, a precursor to the famous Grand Trunk Road. This wasn't just about control. It was about creating a unified economic and cultural space. For the first time, from the Hindu Kush Mountains in the west to the plains of Bengal in the east, from the Himalayas in the north to the Deccan Plateau in the south, a vast portion of the Indian subcontinent was united under a single stable and prosperous rule. Chandragupta Maurya's reign was a golden age of prosperity and cultural development. Agriculture, the backbone of the economy, flourished thanks to state-sponsored irrigation projects. Trade boomed, both within the empire and with foreign powers like the Seleucids, Egypt, and beyond. Pataliputra became a vibrant cosmopolitan center, attracting scholars, artists, and merchants from all over the known world. Megasthenes, a Greek ambassador sent by Seleucus, lived in the Mauryan court for years and wrote a detailed account called Indica. Although the original work is lost, fragments that survive in later writings paint a vivid picture of a magnificent city with wooden palaces, lush parks, and a sophisticated society governed by. Ever wondered how one man could topple a powerful empire and build another from its ashes, all with the power of his mind? This is the story of Chanakya, a name that echoes through the corridors of history as the ultimate master of strategy and statecraft. Long before Machiavelli wrote The Prince, this Indian philosopher, teacher, and royal advisor penned the Arthashastra, a groundbreaking treatise on politics, economics, and military strategy. It's not just a book. It's a blueprint for power, a guide that would shape the destiny of an entire subcontinent. So, who was this brilliant, often ruthless kingmaker? And how did his ideas, born over 2,000 years ago, create one of the largest empires of the ancient world? Join us as we unravel the life and legacy of the man who played the Game of Thrones and won. Our story begins in a time of turmoil. The vast Indian subcontinent was a patchwork of kingdoms, but the most powerful was the Magadha kingdom, ruled by the opulent but deeply unpopular Nanda dynasty. The Nanda king, Dhanananda, was known for his greed and arrogance. It was in his court that our protagonist, a humble but exceptionally intelligent scholar named Vishnugupta, later known as Chanakya, faced a profound insult. Legend has it that he was publicly humiliated by the king, an act of disrespect that ignited a fire within him. As he was thrown out of the court, Chanakya made a solemn vow. He left his top knot of hair untied, swearing he would not tie it again until he had utterly destroyed the Nanda dynasty and wiped their arrogance from the face of the earth. This wasn't just a threat. It was a promise that would set in motion a chain of events to reshape history. But Chanakya knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed a king, a worthy leader who could unite the people and command an army. His search for the perfect protégés led him to a remarkable young boy. While traveling, Chanakya stumbled upon a group of children playing a game. One boy, acting as a king, was dispensing justice with an astonishing wisdom and authority far beyond his years. This boy was Chandragupta Maurya. Though of humble origins, possibly even an orphan, Chanakya saw in him the spark of a true ruler, courage, intelligence, and a natural sense of leadership. He took the young Chandragupta under his wing, bringing him to the renowned University of Taxila. There, he personally mentored him, schooling him not just in academics and military tactics, but in the harsh realities of politics and the subtle art of governance. Their shared goal was clear and absolute: the complete and total overthrow of the Nanda dynasty. This partnership between the brilliant strategist and the charismatic young warrior would become the stuff of legend, a perfect alliance of brain and brawn destined for greatness. So, what exactly did Chanakya teach Chandragupta? The core of his philosophy was laid out in his magnum opus, the Arthashastra, which literally translates to the science of material gain, or more broadly, the science of politics. This wasn't a manual for feel-good leadership. It was a pragmatic, often ruthless guide to acquiring and maintaining power. Chanakya believed that a king's primary duty was the welfare of his people and the security of his state, and any means necessary to achieve that end were justified. His teachings revolved around four key principles: the Sama, Dhamma, Beda, Danda. Sama means conciliation or negotiation, try to make allies and win over opponents peacefully first. Dhamma is about using gifts or incentives, essentially, buying loyalty or cooperation. If those fail, you move to Beda, which means creating division, sowing discord among your enemies to weaken them from within. And finally, if all else fails, there is Danda, the use of force, punishment, and outright war. It was a flexible, multi-layered approach to diplomacy and conflict. But perhaps Chanakya's most infamous and effective tool was his emphasis on espionage. The Arthashastra details the creation of a vast and incredibly intricate network of spies. These weren't just cloak and dagger agents. Chanakya recommended recruiting spies from every walk of life: merchants, artisans, monks, entertainers, and even courtesans. He created a hierarchy of intelligence, with spies spying on other spies to ensure loyalty and accuracy. This network served multiple purposes. It gathered intelligence on enemy kingdoms, monitored public opinion, identified corrupt officials within the state, and spread misinformation to destabilize rivals. It was the eyes and ears of the king, a silent, pervasive force that could predict threats, exploit weaknesses, and ensure the ruler was always one step ahead. For Chanakya, information wasn't just power. It was the foundation upon which an empire was built and sustained. This intricate system of governance and intelligence was the weapon he was sharpening, to aim directly at the heart of the Nanda Empire. With Chandragupta now a trained and capable military leader, the time for action had come. The initial attempts to attack the Nanda capital, Pataliputra, directly were disastrous. They were repelled, learning a hard lesson. A famous story tells of them overhearing a mother scolding her child for eating from the center of a hot cake and burning his fingers. She told him to eat from the edges first, where it's cooler. This simple observation was a eureka moment for Chanakya. They had been trying to conquer the heart of the empire first. They needed to change their strategy. Following this new insight, Chanakya and Chandragupta began a systematic campaign of conquering the outer provinces of the Nanda kingdom first. They built alliances with local rulers, raised a formidable army, and slowly but surely encircled the capital, cutting off its resources and support. They used all the tactics from the Arthashastra negotiation, bribery, creating dissent within the Nanda ranks, and of course, sheer military force. The final confrontation was brutal, but the corrupt and internally weakened Nanda dynasty was no match for the strategic genius of Chanakya and the military prowess of Chandragupta. Dana Nanda was overthrown, and just as Chanakya had vowed years ago, his dynasty was extinguished. At the age of just 20, Chandragupta Maurya ascended the throne, and the Mauryan Empire was born. But seizing power was only half the battle. Maintaining it was the true test. With Chanakya as his chief minister, the new Mauryan Empire was structured as a model of efficient, centralized administration, all based on the principles of the Arthashastra. They established a robust bureaucracy to manage everything from tax collection and trade to justice and public works. The empire was divided into provinces, each with its own governor, but all were ultimately accountable to the emperor in Pataliputra. The spy network that helped them win the war was now institutionalized, becoming a permanent fixture of the state to ensure stability and prevent rebellion. It was a government that was highly organized, systematic, and, for its time, remarkably effective. This stability allowed for unprecedented economic prosperity. Trade routes flourished, a single currency was established, and agriculture was improved through state-sponsored irrigation projects. The Mauryan Empire wasn't just a military conquest. It was a marvel of ancient engineering and administration, a testament to Chanakya's vision of a strong, unified, and prosperous state. He had not just made Chandragupta a king. He had given him the tools to become an emperor of a thriving civilization. The legacy of Chanakya is complex and continues to be debated even today. Was he a patriot who saved his land from a corrupt tyrant, or a ruthless manipulator who believed the ends always justified the means? The answer is probably a bit of both. His political philosophy, often called Chanakya Niti, is studied in business schools and political science courses around the world. His strategies on warfare, diplomacy, and espionage feel surprisingly modern. He understood human nature, our greed, our ambition, our fears, and he built a system of governance that accounted for it all. The Arthashastra remains a chillingly pragmatic document, a stark reminder that the game of power has rules that have changed little over the millennia. Chanakya's story is a powerful lesson in how a single individual, armed with intellect, determination, and a clear vision, can alter the course of history. He tied his top knot only after his vow was fulfilled, having not just destroyed an empire, but having forged a new one that would stand as a beacon of civilization for centuries. The shadow of the kingmaker from Magadha looms large, a timeless symbol of political genius and unwavering resolve. Have you ever heard of a conqueror who, at the peak of his power, laid down his sword forever? A ruthless emperor who became a beacon of peace? This isn't a myth or a fairy tale. This is the incredible true story of Ashoka the Great, a ruler who transformed an empire and himself, leaving a legacy that echoes through millennia. Our story begins in the 3rd century BCE, in the heart of the mighty Mauryan Empire, which stretched across almost the entire Indian subcontinent. It was a realm of immense wealth, sprawling cities, and formidable armies. Into this world of power and politics was born a prince named Ashoka. From a young age, he was a force to be reckoned with. Fiercely ambitious and a brilliant military strategist, Ashoka was not one to be trifled with. Legends say he was known for his fiery temper and ruthless nature, earning him the nickname Chandragupta, or Ashoka the Fierce. He wasn't the first in line for the throne, but that didn't stop him. After his father's death, a bitter war of succession erupted. Ashoka, with his sharp mind and unwavering resolve, crushed his rivals, reportedly even his own brothers, to seize the throne and become the 3rd emperor of the Mauryan dynasty. In the early years of his reign, Ashoka was every bit the conqueror his ancestors were. He ruled with an iron fist, expanding the empire's borders with relentless military campaigns. He was a master of statecraft, a formidable warrior king whose name inspired both loyalty and fear. The Mauryan Empire under his command was a well-oiled machine of conquest and administration. But one kingdom remained defiant, a thorn in the side of his grand imperial vision: Kalinga. Located on the east coast of India, modern-day Orissa, Kalinga was a prosperous and powerful state. It controlled vital trade routes, both by land and sea, and its independence was a direct challenge to Ashoka's dream of a unified subcontinent under his rule. For Ashoka, the conquest of Kalinga was not just a strategic necessity. It was the final piece of his imperial puzzle. He had tried diplomacy, but Kalinga refused to bow. And so, in the 8th year of his reign, Ashoka unleashed the full might of the Mauryan army upon the small but defiant kingdom. He was determined to bring Kalinga to its knees, no matter the cost. What followed was not just a battle. It was a cataclysm. The Kalinga War was one of the most brutal and bloody conflicts in ancient history. The people of Kalinga fought with ferocious courage to defend their homeland, but they were no match for the sheer size and power of Ashoka's war machine. The Mauryan army, a massive force of infantry, cavalry, and terrifying war elephants, descended upon Kalinga like a storm of steel and fury. The resistance was fierce, but the outcome was inevitable. The fields of Kalinga were drenched in blood. The rivers ran red. After the final battle was won, Ashoka, as was the custom for a victorious king, rode out to survey his new conquest. He expected to feel the thrill of victory, the pride of a conqueror who had achieved his ultimate goal. But what he saw shattered him to his core. The land was a smoldering ruin. The city was a graveyard. As far as his eyes could see, there was nothing but death and devastation. He saw the bodies of over 100,000 soldiers and civilians littering the battlefield. He saw families torn apart, homes reduced to ashes. The air was thick with the cries of the wounded and the mourning. 150,000 people were captured and deported, their lives ruined forever. In that moment, standing amidst the carnage he had wrought, Ashoka was overwhelmed by a profound sense of remorse and disgust. This was the price of his ambition. This was the fruit of his victory. The sight of the endless suffering he had caused ignited a firestorm in his soul. The pride of conquest turned to ash in his mouth. He was no longer Ashoka the Fierce, the great conqueror. He was a man haunted by the ghosts of Kalinga. The triumphant emperor returned to his capital, Pataliputra, not as a victor, but as a broken man. The war had been won, but his spirit was defeated. This profound crisis of conscience would become the defining turning point of his life and reign. Haunted by the horrors he had witnessed, Ashoka sought solace. He found it in the teachings of a philosophy that was gaining influence at the time: Buddhism. He met with Buddhist monks and began to study the principles of Dharma, the path of righteousness, compassion, and nonviolence. The teachings of the Buddha resonated deeply with his tormented soul. The concept of ahimsa, or non-harm to all living beings, offered him a path to redemption. It was a radical departure from the life he had known, a complete rejection of the warrior ethos that had defined him and his ancestors. Ashoka embraced Buddhism with the same fervor he once reserved for conquest. He made a solemn vow to abandon violence and to dedicate his life to the welfare of his people and all humanity. This was not a private conversion. It was a public declaration that would fundamentally reshape his empire. The sword that had conquered Kalinga was sheathed forever. Chandragupta, Ashoka the Fierce, was gone. In his place emerged Dharma Ashoka, Ashoka the Righteous. His transformation was absolute. He renounced military expansion and embarked on a new kind of conquest, a conquest of hearts through Dharma. This new mission began with a series of revolutionary reforms. Ashoka understood that to spread his message, he needed to make it visible and permanent. He commissioned the creation of thousands of edicts, which were carved onto massive stone pillars and rock faces throughout his vast empire. These weren't just royal decrees. They were public declarations of his new philosophy. Written in local languages so everyone could understand, the edicts of Ashoka outlined his principles of humane governance. They spoke of religious tolerance, forbidding the persecution of other faiths. They called for the just and humane treatment of all people, including servants and prisoners. They even advocated for the protection of animals, establishing what might be the world's first veterinary hospitals and nature reserves. These pillars, some of which still stand today, were the billboards of his new moral code, a constant reminder to his officials and subjects of the principles by which the empire would now be governed. But Ashoka's efforts went far beyond inscriptions on stone. He poured the empire's resources into public works that would improve the lives of his people. He built roads and planted shade trees along them for travelers. He dug wells and constructed rest houses. He established hospitals for both humans and animals, and cultivated botanical gardens to grow medicinal herbs. He appointed special officials, called the Dharma Mahamatras, whose job was to travel the empire, ensure justice was being served, and promote welfare and piety among the populace. He released prisoners, encouraged charity, and preached respect for parents, elders, and teachers. His vision of a compassionate empire wasn't limited to his own borders. Ashoka became one of history's greatest missionaries. He sent Buddhist emissaries, including his own son Mahinda and daughter Sanghamitta, to spread the teachings of the Buddha across the known world. They traveled to Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and even as far as Greece and North Africa. This royal patronage was instrumental in transforming Buddhism from a small Indian sect into a major world religion. He sponsored the Third Buddhist Council to codify the scriptures and purify the faith. Through his efforts, the message of peace and compassion that had transformed his own life began to ripple across continents. For nearly 40 years after the Kalinga War, Ashoka ruled in peace. He had inherited an empire built on military might and transformed it into one founded on moral principles. He proved that a ruler's greatness is not measured by the size of their territory, but by the well-being of their subjects. He demonstrated that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity for compassion. When Ashoka passed away around 232 BCE, he left behind a legacy unlike any other. He was an emperor who had all power, wealth, and absolute authority, and chose to redefine what it meant to be a king. His story is a powerful testament to the human capacity for change and redemption. The symbol of his empire, the Ashoka Chakra, a 24-spoked wheel representing the eternal law of Dharma, is now at the center of India's national flag. The lion capital from one of his pillars is the official emblem of modern India. These are not just historical artifacts. They are enduring symbols of his vision of a just and peaceful world. The story of Ashoka the Great is a timeless reminder that even in the face of immense power, the path of peace is always an option. It's the story of how one person's profound change of heart could alter the course of history, leaving behind a legacy of compassion that continues to inspire us more than 2,000 years later. At its peak, the Mauryan Empire was a colossus, stretching across the Indian subcontinent under the rule of its greatest emperor, Ashoka. It was a civilization of immense power, wealth, and cultural achievement. But like all great empires, it was destined to fall. The question isn't just that it fell, but how. How did this mighty empire, which once seemed invincible, crumble into dust in less than 50 years after Ashoka's death? This is the story of the dramatic collapse of the Mauryan Empire, a tale of weak kings, internal rot, and a final fatal blow. To understand the fall, we must first look at the empire at its zenith. Under Ashoka, the Mauryan state was a finely tuned machine. A vast bureaucracy managed everything from tax collection to public works. A powerful army, one of the largest in the ancient world, secured its borders. And Ashoka's policy of Dhamma, a moral code promoting peace and tolerance, provided a unifying ideology for its diverse population. He was the glue that held it all together. But what happens when that glue dissolves? The year is 232 BCE. Ashoka the Great is dead. His passing leaves a power vacuum that his successors are utterly unprepared to fill. The empire, which had been governed by his singular vision and formidable personality, immediately begins to fracture. Ashoka's sons and grandsons squabbled over the throne, leading to a series of weak, short-lived rulers. Imagine a giant ship that has lost its captain in the middle of a storm. That was the Mauryan Empire after Ashoka. There was no one with the strength, charisma, or political skill to steer the state. One of the first and most critical problems was the succession crisis. The historical records are a bit murky, but it seems the empire was divided among Ashoka's heirs. One son, Kunala, ruled the western provinces, while another, perhaps Dasharatha, controlled the eastern heartland. This division was a catastrophic mistake. It immediately weakened the central authority that had been the cornerstone of Mauryan power. Provincial governors, who were once loyal administrators, began to see an opportunity. With a weak hand on the tiller in the capital city of Pataliputra, they started to act like independent kings, withholding tax revenue and ignoring imperial commands. The empire wasn't just cracking, it was actively being pulled apart from within. Let's talk about these successors. Names like Dasharatha, Samprati, Salazuka. They don't have the same ring as Chandragupta or Ashoka, do they? And for good reason. They were, by most accounts, ineffective rulers. They lacked the military prowess of Chandragupta and the administrative genius of Ashoka. They were palace-bound kings, more concerned with court intrigues than the massive challenges facing their empire. While the ship of state was taking on water, they were busy rearranging the furniture in the captain's cabin. This weakness at the very top had a domino effect, cascading down through the entire administration. The highly centralized bureaucracy that Ashoka had perfected now became a liability. This complex system required a strong, decisive leader to function. Without one, it ground to a halt. Corruption, which had been kept in check by Ashoka's strict oversight, became rampant. Officials started feathering their own nests instead of serving the state. Tax collection grew inefficient, and public works projects were abandoned. The arteries of the empire, the roads and communication networks, fell into disrepair. Information and orders from the capital took longer to reach the provinces, and by the time they did, they were often ignored. The empire was becoming deaf and blind to its own problems. Then came the financial crisis. This was the slow poison that crippled the Mauryan state. Maintaining a vast empire is incredibly expensive. You have to pay a massive army, a legion of bureaucrats, and fund public works. The Mauryans were bleeding money. Ashoka's reign, for all its glory, had been costly. His extensive building projects and donations to Buddhist monasteries, while noble, had strained the treasury. Furthermore, his policy of Dhamma, which renounced aggressive warfare, meant the empire was no longer expanding and bringing in new sources of revenue from conquered lands. His successors inherited a state with massive expenses and dwindling income. As provincial governors broke away, the tax base shrunk even further. The empire was going broke. We have archaeological evidence of this crisis. Later Mauryan coins are often debased, made with less precious metal and of poorer quality than those from Ashoka's time. This is a classic sign of a state in severe financial distress. They were literally running out of money. To compensate, they likely had to raise taxes on the territories they still controlled, which would have only increased discontent among the populace. An overtaxed population and an underpaid army are a recipe for disaster, which brings us to the military. The Mauryan army was once the terror of the subcontinent. But after Ashoka, it began to wither. His emphasis on nonviolence, while morally admirable, may have had the unintended consequence of weakening the empire's martial spirit. More importantly, the financial crisis meant the state could no longer afford to maintain its massive standing army. Soldiers went unpaid, training lapsed, and equipment was not replaced. A weakened military was an open invitation for trouble, both from within and without. As the central government weakened, the provinces began to declare independence. The regions of Kalinga, which Ashoka had brutally conquered, and Andhra in the south were among the first to break away. In the northwest, the Bactrian Greeks, successors to Alexander the Great's empire, saw their chance. They began to push into Mauryan territory, launching invasions that the weakened imperial army could barely repel. The once mighty borders of the empire were collapsing. The Mauryan state was shrinking, becoming a shadow of its former self, largely confined to the Gangetic Plain. Imagine the scene in the capital, Pataliputra, around 185 BCE. The empire is a fraction of its former size. The treasury is empty, the army is demoralized and disloyal. The king on the throne, Brihadrata, is the last of the Mauryan line, a ruler in name only. He holds a grand military parade, a desperate attempt to project a power he no longer possesses. As he reviews his troops, his own commander-in-chief, a general named Pushyamitra Shunga, steps forward, but he's not there to salute. In full view of the army, Pushyamitra assassinates the king. This was the final decisive blow. The army, long neglected by the Mauryan rulers, did not intervene. They likely supported the coup. Pushyamitra Shunga immediately declared himself the new king, establishing the Shunga dynasty and bringing the Mauryan Empire to an unceremonious end. There was no great battle, no last stand. The empire didn't fall with a bang. It ended with a betrayal in its own capital. So, how did it happen? How did the glorious empire of Ashoka collapse so quickly? It wasn't one single thing. It was a perfect storm of failures. First, the lack of a capable successor. Ashoka was a once-in-a-generation leader, and his heirs were simply not up to the task. Second, the internal decay. The administrative machinery broke down, corruption ran rampant, and the empire went bankrupt. This internal rot made it impossible to govern effectively. Third, the military decline. A state that cannot defend its borders or control its own army is doomed. And finally, external pressures and internal rebellions. As the empire weakened, everyone from provincial governors to foreign invaders took a piece for themselves. The fall of the Mauryan Empire is a timeless lesson in history. It shows that no matter how powerful an empire is, its survival depends on strong leadership, a stable administration, economic health, and military strength. The Mauryans lost all four, and their collapse became inevitable. It is a dramatic reminder that even the mightiest structures can crumble if their foundations are allowed to rot away. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the collapse of a great empire fascinating, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. See you next time.